should be live. My other computer's being dead, so just a moment. Get this ready for an email. Time for class. Alright. Can't seem to get into the portal. Try that one more time. Nope. Okay. So before we get started, this is gonna be a pain in the butt. Something that got sent out. Where is it? Oh, no, inbox. Here we go. Alternative grading policy. Now this is for undergrads. I assume this works for you guys. I'll have to see. Satisfactory or S be assigned for regular grades of C or above. Unsatisfactory for D or F. Will not be used in calculating semester overall GPAs. Will provide credit hours. Will allow for students. S will allow for students to progress to higher levels in all course sequences and be valid grade as prerequisite. So, that's up to you guys if you want to do that. You've got until the end of the semester to decide whether you want to do it or not. I need to discuss with my advisor. I'm not my advisor. The lady that runs the continuum, or that is our Anna, that is between Francis Mary and the continuum. Whether that counts for you guys or not, since you guys are high school students. So, yeah, figured that out. I didn't realize my old laptop that I used for just viewing the stream and checking to see if you guys have any comments was gonna be updating. So that's gonna happen. Awesome. Okay, well, this class tends to not you guys tend to not ask any questions, at least early on, or even show up, to be fair. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the material, and then Okay. Da, 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 da. Right. So, back to this. Oh, my back. I on Tuesday after teaching, I was, as I mentioned, my stomach was killing me, and I decided, well, I'll just lay down on the couch for a little bit because my cat had come in here and I'd brought a blanket, so I was like, well, I'll just stretch out on the couch. And I mean, this is a futon and it's not terribly comfortable, and I had lay down for a couple of hours, and that was a bad idea because by the time I woke up, my back was just absolutely killing me. And like, so all day Tuesday and all day yesterday, my back was just an absolute shambles. Um, but I mean, I can at least sit up today. That was something I couldn't do yesterday. So progress. Let's get this up. Anyway, we brought up the split in the Socialist Party. Karl Marx and Frederick Engels had the International Working Men's Organization, eventually refounded in 1889 as the Second International, which by this point had diverged between the orthodox Marxists who wanted to overthrow capitalism and had become communist, and the revisionists that believed that they could work for better wages and conditions within the system. So the revisionists were the democratic socialists, who again saw that you could just, or believed that they could just, win elections and just fix the system itself. And the communists who were just like, we should have a revolution and overthrow the government. And then, of course, you had the anarchists who were just like, let's just overthrow the government entirely. Now, the Russo-Japanese War, again, it's got its own sidebar. Alright, computer, hurry up. So I figured it was worth discussing separately. Huh. Anyway. Because I believe I wrote a paper on this, if I remember right. It's been a while. I know I read a lot on this during my modern Russia class. So anyway, as the Qing Empire is collapsing, open that up. Russia grabbed the war motor port of Port Arthur because, hey, Russia's all about getting ports that don't freeze up during the winter. But Japan saw that believed that it was rightfully theirs. Now, it wasn't in Japan, it was part of what was formerly China, but Japan believed that they had more right to the area because they were there first. I mean, it's all, we're going to take this before you guys do. So Russia started moving into Manchuria and Korea, which, again, Japan felt like they had dibs on, particularly Korea. Japan attacked Port Arthur in February of 1904, And like there's a whole thing about that particular battle getting into that port and the Russians trying to fight them off and all this stuff. If I can get this to work. Let's cancel that. We don't need any of this other stuff to turn on right now. So they bought up the Russian Navy, started tearing it apart, landed troops and pushed the Russians back from the important city of Merkton. And by January 1905, the Japanese had taken Port Arthur, and by May, the Russians were suing for peace. Now, was it this one or World War One? It was World War One. Okay, there's a whole story, a whole awful story that I have to tell you guys in a little bit when it comes to Russia's navy. We'll get there in a little bit. Okay, I've almost got this up. I like being able to see what's going on just so I'll know that I've got everything up. What the hell? Go away. System startup nonsense. Alright. Also, it should be mentioned that we got involved. And by we, I mean the United States. Make sure this isn't loud. Make sure I don't have... I mean, I shouldn't have the sound on at all since this is my channel. As the war was nearing its end, the United States wanted to, get its feet wet, get its hands in the pie, as it were. And this was when Theodore Roosevelt was president, if I remember right. And so he had the diplomats from... had the Japanese and the Russian diplomats come to... I don't think it was actually Washington, but I know it was in America, to work out a peace deal. So, FYI, that was a thing. Now, another reason why this was a big deal, because... great, it's not exactly crystal clear. Racism in Europe. There was this belief in the white superiority over the Oriental people of the Far East. It's like, oh, well, we've been just beating the crap out of China, and even after the Sepoy Rebellion, it was still this idea that, oh, well, we know better than these other people. The Europeans know better. And Russia, even though it was a bit removed from Europe, both geographically and culturally, was still considered European. So the fact that they got trounced by this Eastern power was shocking for Europe. And I'm buffering, yay. It's always something. And in turn, the Eastern people that were part of these Western empires, the people in Indochina, the people in the Dutch Indochina, I already said Indochina. The Dutch East Indies, I think. The areas where the Europeans were in control. Why is it buffering so bad? Can I go? It's always something during the first class. Anyway, real quick. Yeah, it showed that if one Eastern power could turn the technology of the West against them, then surely it could be done again. Let me see if I can figure this out real quick. Well, it's working there. I mean, it could just be my... Could be my garbage laptop. Output. This has got a good connection. It's always freaking something. Anyway, so the Russo-Japanese War was, I mean, short. It was a little over a year, but it was a major shock for the Europeans. So here we have, oh no, that was the Russian Baltic Fleet. Yeah, so, we've got Port Arthur there, the battles up in Manchuria. The Russian fleet did eventually make it up to Japan, and then they got wiped out there at the Battle of Tsushima. I'll see if I can find the video on that, and I'll send that to you over Blackboard. It's this whole thing. What in the world is the matter with this stupid internet today? Okay. Is it? No. Anyway. So yeah, they wanted the area there in the gray to be a neutral zone, but 1905, they lost control of that, and all that in Manchuria was given to Japan as well. Russia kept Vladivostok. That was what they really wanted, but Japan got all that. Now, I'm trying to remember. Because I feel like the Russian Baltic Fleet, that... Was it during this war, or was it during World War One? Because I know that they almost went to war with Britain. It had to have been this, because they were allied with Britain during that war. Yeah. So it was this. There's a whole thing about this. So, obviously... Well, okay. So they've got a port here, and they've got a port here. But the thing is, this isn't connected via any kind of railroad. So they can't get any, ship parts here. They can't get any large machinery here. So this is just a little, fishing port, if anything. Port Arthur was the only place with any naval vessels, and Japan just flattened that. So the only way to get naval vessels there was to sail them all the way from Russia, from St. Petersburg, around Europe, around Africa, all the way around India, China, all the way up to Japan. And that was an absolute disaster. As I said, they fired on British ships thinking the Japanese had somehow gotten that far up there. They fired on one another by accident. They wasted most of their ammunition trying to do like naval training exercises and missing almost every time. They lost ships. They refound their ships. They stopped over Madagascar to regroup and refuel, and then took a bunch of just like wild animals on board the ship, and then ended up getting hunted by said wild animals on board their ships. It was an absolute catastrophe. And then they got to Japan and all got destroyed. So like it was an absolute. It was just. I've got to find it. It's amazing. Yeah. It is a thing. So bring it back to life. Okay. If we were in class, I would find it and we would actually just like watch it. Now, the pressure of this war caused the pressure of this war and a number of other things caused pressure within Russia. So by December of 1904, workers in the Putilov armaments factory in St. Petersburg were becoming tired of the poor performance in the war, and they were blaming the Tsar because, I mean, he was, the state. So they initiated a strike. Workers all over the city joined them, shutting down the capital entirely. They met with an Orthodox priest, Father Gapon, and worked out a petition for representative assembly. So we saw a little bit of a representative assembly back with Ivan the Terrible. The Duma. But this would be something more akin to a parliament. This would be something that actually had power. So, on the 22nd of January 1905, 200,000 men, women, and children gathered in front of the Winter Palace, which is where the Tsar normally was, hoping to make the Tsar recognize how bad things were for them. However, he wasn't home. The guards panicked, killing or wounding nearly 1,000, because, in Russia, you don't have small numbers. So following this, what was known as Bloody Sunday, radicals formed Soviets, which were simply elected councils within factories. That's where we get the term Soviet. The Tsar permitted token reforms, so the Soviets called for a general strike. Now, a general strike, well, it doesn't sound like much. It's like, oh, okay, a strike. A general strike means everybody strikes. Like, it's like, oh, okay, the guys at the Ford Motor Company are striking. Okay, cool. A general strike means the entire city are going on strike. The the car. Well, I don't think they had cars in Russia at this time, but the munitions workers, the train lines are shutting down. The power plants are shutting down. The mail workers are walking out. Like just everything, everybody's just not working. Oh no, this is the Duma. What was I thinking about before? It doesn't matter. Here's the Duma. This is the proper national parliament. Whatever it was that Ivan the Terrible had before, this is now the reformed version. This is an incident that happened during this period. Something else I need to post for you guys to look at. The battleship Potemkin. Now, it was an event that happened, as you can see there in the poster, in 1905. Now, the actual motion picture wasn't made until the time of the Soviet Union, and obviously it was. Do I have any more? No, I don't. Okay, I'll pull back and talk about this for just a moment. So the battleship Potemkin. Um, it was a ship in the Baltic, I believe. Um, it was in Odessa. It was in Odessa that it happened. Um, basically uh, the crew were being mistreated by the officers, and like I know specifically at one point they're like it shows them go to their bread and they pick it up and it's just like dust and it's full of maggots. And it's like, oh no, you have to eat this bread. This is all you've got. Uh, and it's heavily implied that like the sailors represent just the regular people and the officers are all the Tsarists. And eventually the sailors overthrow the officers and mutiny and take over the ship. And they go to this little town in Odessa, which is this. Well, I guess it's just Odessa, yeah, which is in the Baltic states. And the people there greet them and see them as heroes for standing up for the common man. And after the ship leaves, the Tsar's forces come in and just like butcher the town. And there's this scene which was the first of its kind in cinema. It's called the Odessa It's the Odessa Steps scene. I'll find it and send it to you guys via email to watch, or not via email. I'll put it on Blackboard. One or the other. I'll make sure you guys have access to it. Um, but anyway, it's this whole thing where these people are, you know, trying to run up these steps and they're getting shot by the Tsar's troops, and it's all very dramatic. But it's using film techniques that had been impossible up until this point. And again, this is like the early 1900s. This is all, silent film era stuff, and it's quite good. And again, it's Soviet Russia, which in the Cold War here in America we're told, oh, they don't have any creativity. They're all just mindless drones, which is not true. Even if the movie itself is eventually just Soviet propaganda, but I mean, you look at anything here in America at the time, it was just anti-Soviet propaganda. So, oh, America's so great. It's like, how's that any different than, oh, Soviet Union's so great? But anyway, yeah, I watched the whole thing. I'm not gonna have you guys watch the whole thing, but I do at least want you guys to see the Odessa Steps scene. So I'll pull that up for you guys a little bit later. Okay. Anyway, let's see. Russian Revolution. In Spain, apparently, 1909, they were having their own issues. Balkan Wars. So, lots of fighting going on. But it was all very regional. So, it wasn't quite worldwide yet. So, anti-Semitism, because, of course, I'm trying to keep this thing going live. Now, a dislike of Jews is one of the few things we've had throughout all of European history. Excuse me. If you guys took my previous course, you'll know that that's something that happened a lot. Like, all the time. But as we were coming to the end of the 19th century, it took on a new dimension. With this social Darwinism, which, again, was this bastardized version of Darwin's ideas. It was considered an issue of race rather than just religion. So anyone who were of Jewish ancestry, even if they were practicing Christians or any religion, were slandered and seen as something lesser. In Russia, the Russian pogroms pushed many Jews west into the rest of Europe. Now, there was a Russian Pale, as it was called, which is where Russian Jews were allowed to live, but these pogroms pushed them out of the Pale and into the rest of Europe. Now, the Jews coming from the Russian Pale were different than the Jews that were there before. Now, the Jews that had already been in Europe for several generations had worked to assimilate themselves. They were, usually business owners and spoke the language of the country there. While the refugees coming out of Russia were poor. They wore traditional dress, spoke Yiddish, and tended to stick together. They weren't, just another group of say Germans or French or British. They were clearly a group of specific people. Which, I mean, yeah, that's how it is. One specific event that happened during this time that really exemplified what was going on was the Dreyfus Affair. And I mean, this thing is. They've got a. They've got a lot of information on it. But basically, A captain in the French military was accused of treason. It says here. Uh, do, 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 do. Yeah, convicted on scanty evidence, court-martialed, sent to prison for life. Uh, yeah, let's see. There was, however, a new investigation. Chief Counterintelligence uncovered evidence pointing to the guilt of a deeply indebted aristocrat and showed the documents used to convict Dreyfus were forgeries. Um, Aristocrat was tried, but now that the honor of the military and judiciary was at stake, the true groups rallied forces and acquitted him. Chief of Counterintelligence who went to jail because, of course. Let's see what else. Actually, there's a lot more to this. Um, uh, these publications, J'accuse, I accuse. French readers were treated to a rhetorical tour de force. Zola accused leading military and judicial officials of forgery. He himself was landed in prison for libel. New official inquiries showed more documents to be forgeries. Um, Rallies were organized on Dreyfus's behalf. It was quite a thing. I mean, I know I literally give it like 2 sentences, but it made it showed how big of a deal this whole anti-Semitism was because the French were so ready, and Europeans in general were just so ready to throw someone under the bus because, oh well, he's, you know, Jewish, so who cares? So these injustices pushed many Jews to look for a nation state of their own to have some kind of backing, because if say a British man in Germany were treated this way, he could at least look to Britain to back him up, to give him some kind of legal representation. But the Jewish people don't have a country of their own, a nation state of their own, to give them some kind of backing. So this formed the basis of Zionism, for the Jews to try and find some place to go home. Yeah. So, and it's that itself, Zionism itself, was a bit spread out. A Jew who wasn't religiously active, Herzl. Thought a new state might be set up in present-day Kenya or Cyprus. Eventually, Zionism, the return to biblical Zion, which is to say Palestine. They felt like that might be the way to do it. They wanted to try to convince the Ottoman Sultan to give Palestine to the Jews. Obviously, he just ignored them. Most Jews went to Europe or to the Americas, and it took much longer for Zionism to properly take hold, as we'll see later on. So, we've still got time yet. It keeps backing up. Okay. So there is Le Petit Journal, the traitor degradation of Alfred Dreyfus. They're breaking his officer's sword there, which is essentially his commission. Le Traiteur. All right. So, of course, we've got to talk about new ways in which people murdered each other, because we are moving towards that. Increasing technology, pressures from all sides. The rate of military improvement soared as well. The French were the first to develop a fast-firing 75mm artillery piece. It could deliver shells up to 7 kilometers. That's substantial. That would be a big deal in the First World War, just pelting each other. So all the major powers were spending a lot of money on military buildup. Germany and Britain were involved in a huge naval arms race. Larger, more powerful warships, including the Dreadnought class, which results in a single battle. Now, despite all of this, European conflict specifically discussed the treatment of prisoners, the Hague Convention on land warfare in 1899, keep from using weapons that may injure civilians, and civilian reprisals were supposed to be entirely stopped. Supposed to be. We'll see how that goes. There's the old Dreadnought class. I don't recognize that flag. I was going to say, I could have sworn I had a picture of the artillery piece, but that's actually, we talk about the technology of the war in the next chapter, and I have a bunch of pictures of the various technologies, so we'll get there. Hopefully not today. I mean, we're gonna start the next chapter here in just a little bit. But hopefully I don't intend to get that far today. But we'll discuss that next time. All right. So we mentioned the Austro-Prussian and Franco-Prussian Wars. Austria had to cede power to its Hungarian half. This also opened the door to more diverse nationalism, as we had said. Many groups within Hungary wanted their own independence. Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Poles, Ukrainians, Ruthenes, Jews, Croats, Serbs, and Italians. So, Emperor Franz Joseph signed a relatively liberal constitution in 1867, trying to hold the empire together. But all these groups tried to pull the empire apart as each ethnic minority was pushed together. So it was like this centrifuge. It was spinning, pushing each of the different groups together, but also pulling the whole apart. It also created a new type of patriotism where the hatred for other groups rather than the love for your own group had the most momentum, which is the sort of the nationalism we have today. Oh, how many pictures there? So, that's what's going on with Austria-Hungary. I'll be sure to post the next PowerPoint after class. Oh, my ankle. Alright. So Austria-Hungary's not doing so well. So, after the Russo-Turkish War, the Russia and Turkey fighting each other, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Romanians all got their own independent states. Come up here. Don't talk. Come here. Serbia moved on Bosnia to annex yet more land. French, British, Russians, Austrians, and Germans sent in more missionaries to open new trade routes in Turkey. So many Turks took out their frustrations on Greeks and Armenians, slaughtering hundreds of thousands of Armenians in Istanbul in 1895. This is the Armenian genocide that Hitler actually refers to in one of his letters. Like, oh, nobody remembers the Armenian genocide because it wasn't heavily reported on. Quit. The Turks also had their own nationalist group, the Young Turks, overthrew the government in 1908. The Balkan War had the Serbs, Bulgarians, and Greeks band together to attack the Turks. They were victorious, but then eventually went to war in the Second Balkan War. The Ottomans joined the Serbs and Greeks against the Bulgarians. So it's like I can sort of see the First Balkan War, where the Serbs, Bulgarians, and Greeks, because they're smaller groups fighting Turkey, but then because Bulgaria gets greedy and wants more land, they then ally with the Ottomans against Bulgaria. It's just a massive mess. And it's no wonder that this region is the cause for the immediate trouble in the First World War. And again, you guys don't need to have too much understanding of what's going on in this map. This is just the Bulgarians and the Ottomans, and it's just a big mess, is the point of this map. But also, the Bulgarians are just like overrunning the Ottomans. Jesus. So, technically, all of this was a time of peace. There are pressures in Europe, and it was constantly increasing. More and more heat was rising within national and individualistic ideals. Nearly everyone in Europe was seeing a new war coming, and then this arms race was adding more fuel to the pile. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, when you've got the pressure, and you've got the heat, and you've got the fuel, and the more pressure you get, the lower the flashpoint becomes, the lower the temperature required to finally ignite everything. And they knew war was coming, but nobody could really predict quite how bad it was going to be. So, Hushcat, let me pull up this one and change the window capture to that. It's very orange. Aha. All right. I hit the wrong button. There we go. Oh, that's not right either. I remember what to do this time. Oh, no, I don't. Hold on. Home. No. Design. No. Slideshow. Yes. Individual window. Cool. Okay. It has to be like this. I can't do a regular full screen because then it won't behave. Okay. Great War. 1918 or 1914 and 1918. Chapter 22. All right. Now it's called the Great War in Europe, and since we're doing a European history course, that's what we're going to call it. Called the First World War in the United States after we had the Second World War, obviously. And Weltkrieg in Germany, simply World War. Sparked by the assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne, and his wife Sofia by the Bosnian Serb Gavrilo Princip, 22nd June 1914. And obviously, as we've seen, and as I've said with these other chapters, this war was the culmination of basically everything since Napoleon. All these pressures that have been building, these empires, the growing technology, the ethnically diverse areas, this idea of nationalism. And the Balkans are called the powder keg, because this is the region where it started. But the powder, if you will, the pressure and the spark were all the same thing, and that is to say nationalism. This desire to have your own country made up of only your people. So there is Ferdinand and Sophie. Ferdinand, of course, having that 19th century mustache. Now, who dares? Huh. Um, so another reason why this war wasn't just like, say, the Russo-Japanese War, or the Balkan Wars, just a little thing, was because the competition between these imperial powers was pushing some together against the others. Germany was working with its continental ally Austria-Hungary. France and Russia formed an alliance, around 1891, based in part on shared culture. Um, Remember the whole Russian ballet in Paris? That was actually part of the reason why they were able to form an alliance. Now, a major part of it was that France and Russia both hated Germany, but another reason was because they both had similar cultures when it came to performative arts. They were about as far apart as you could get when it came to government and how the countries were ran. But when it came to that, Russian ballet, like, yeah, no, this is fine. We can understand this. So that's something I feel worth mentioning. Did I zoom in? I zoomed in. Reset. Ah! I broke everything. Okay. Uh, Now, Britain was bound to the Treaty of London, as we mentioned back when we talked about Belgium, to protect Belgian neutrality, but it didn't really want to help France. As I mentioned, there's actually a lot of writing on Britain having the main thing Britain wanted to do was just to stay out of it. I was like, okay, well, Germany and France are going to beat the crap out of each other, no big deal. Russia's involved. We probably shouldn't get in on this. This is just going to be another Franco-Prussian War, whatever. But the Belgian neutrality thing happened, and they're like, oh, we have to get involved. So that was what happened. But there was actually some push in Britain to ally with Germany because the British hated the French so much. And, remember, the British royal family is German. They're from Hanover, which is a German state. So there was actually we're more German than we are French, so why don't we just ally with the Germans and beat the crap out of the French? That'll be great. The U.S., though, we were busy, making sure the Pacific stayed where it was. Italy also joined the Central Powers, at least for a little while. And then they switched sides. Italy's Italy tries. That's all I'll say. Um, yeah, we get some stuff. Turkey joins the Allies, and no, Central Powers. Because I know Turkey and Russia go at it for a little bit. All right. Does this make sense? No? Good. um, yeah, it's just a big mess. Come here, cat. Get up here and hush. Um, so yeah, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy. Again, Italy jumped ship after it got bad. Um, the Ottoman Empire, kind of. Hush, cat. But see, here's the main issue: is Austria-Hungary gets involved with Bulgaria, well, Bulgaria and Serbia. But Russia is involved with Bulgaria and Serbia. The Ottoman Empire is too, but they're not as big of a deal in what we're talking about. So the Austria-Hungary knew that if they pushed hard in here, that Russia was going to get involved. So they made sure that Germany would get involved, and France would get involved if Germany got involved, and Britain would get involved if Germany went across went across Belgium. So it's just a whole big mess, and then Italy is also sort of there. Don't bite me, you piece of shit. Let everybody see you. Nobody's in here. Go lay in my book or whatever. Alright. So, the European empires were still reaching across the globe. But there were more conflicts between their various empires globally. Germany, of course, was shifting the balance of power because they were this new, power in the middle of Europe. Southeastern Europe, though, was the big problem. German and West Russian empires, the crumbling Austrian and Ottoman empires. So there was growing power on the fringes. There was weakening power in the middle. It created, chaos, and it's going to cause problems. I mean, I don't have any better way to say that. And again, the chaos made the Balkans more of an issue for everybody involved. Because as I said, if you've got any kind of interest there, you're going to try to keep it stable, but the people there don't want you there, and they're willing to do anything to get you out, and it's going to be bad. So there is this is the one I was going to look at. I was trying to find. So this is Austria-Hungary. And these are the various groups. You've got a bunch of Germans there in Austria itself. Hungarians, obviously, in Hungary. You've got Czechs up here, Slovaks there, a bunch of Poles up towards the Russian Empire, Ukrainians, Slovenes down here. What else we got? Croats and Serbians down here, Croatia, Slovenia. Romanians and Italians down this way, obviously towards Italy. So the Ottoman Empire was weakening. Balkans became more and more independent. Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, Albanians, Romanians all had their own states. We had mentioned that. But they weren't satisfied. Albanians overthrew their prince. Serbs wanted Albanian coast. Greeks, Bulgarians, Romanians wanted more territory. Ottomans wanted it back. Even worse, though, the Slavic inhabitants of Bosnia, which were technically still under the control of Austria, wanted their own state. So there we have Austria-Hungary, Serbia, Montenegro, and there's Bosnia right here. I think we'll do the July crisis next time because that creates a cascading effect that I feel like we probably shouldn't get into in 5 minutes. So next week, I'm gonna try and have as much stuff graded as I can for you guys. I might try and grade your tests first, just so we can have some kind of discussion on if I need to talk about how you guys did them and if there's some tips on that before we get to the next one, because that one's coming up as we get to the end of this chapter. Yeah. What else? Oh, well, the last paper, which will be due whenever the hell the last day of class is, the end of this month, I guess. It's on this chapter, World War One. Again, it can be on anything since the last paper, so anything since like Napoleon. But the main topic is who do you think started World War One? Because the normal one is, oh well, it's Germany's fault because they allowed Austria to do whatever they wanted, knowing that Austria would push Serbia into the war and blah blah blah. But I mean, you can argue that almost anybody was the cause of it, as long as you make the argument. So that's up to you. But again, you're welcome to talk about really anything, as long as it's been since Napoleon up to World War II. But yeah, so that'll do it. I'm going to end this just a little bit early so I can get the other class stuff ready and maybe kick back for a minute before we do that. So, I'd ask if you guys had any questions, but I don't think anybody's actually in here. I don't think anybody shows up for this class. And I don't know how to fix that. Oh well. See you guys next week. It's Thursday, right? I think it's Thursday. Yesterday was Wednesday. That's how days work. Email's gotten interesting. Yeah. See you guys next Tuesday. Have a good weekend. Be safe. Cat. And yeah, I'll see y'all later. That's all I've got. See you later. Let me find my doodad here. Yeah. And this before I call.